So, hi, I'm Doug Reynolds, and Pam and I started LowCarbUSA with the idea of trying to get beyond the bubble of fanatical followers that were going to all these little conferences and try and reach more people. And I couldn't believe I was 53 and had never heard about these things, and so I felt like this is something that we can do to try and get beyond the bubble. So I went beyond this in Florida. I actually gave my testimonial and told my whole story, and I'm not going to do that this time. It's on YouTube, it's on our website, under the free videos. You can go and find it, find out how I got into this and why I'm so passionate about it. But what I would rather spend the little time I've got on here before they kick me off the stage is to maybe just share a couple of things. First of all, a couple of testimonials of things that came out of last year's conference. And then just a little bit of an introduction to what's going to go on tomorrow afternoon, because to me, that's the most exciting thing that's happened since I started this organization. And I'm very excited about what can come out about that. So I want to get a little bit of an introduction into that now, and then we can pick it up again tomorrow. So towards the end of last year, a guy reached out to me, a doctor, and he had been at our conference in August, and he wanted to meet up. And so we ended up meeting up, and he's told us the story that he's an internal medicine doc. He's been in practice for a long time, and was never really having any success with his patients, especially the diabetics and the people that were suffering with obesity and stuff. And he himself was following the general, sad diet and the guidelines, and was himself putting on weight and struggling and not feeling like he was as healthy as he should be. And he heard about the idea of restricting carbohydrates and the ketogenic diet, and kind of started trying it on himself, and his weight was starting to come off and all of that, but he didn't feel like he had the confidence to prescribe it for his patients, or at least advise some of his patients to try it. And then he came to this conference and he heard all these amazing international speakers and clinicians and stuff talking about this, and by the end of it, he now had the confidence to say, okay, this is a legitimate thing. And so he went back and started to tell his patients about it. Now, he said he's been in practice for 15 years. Not once in those 15 years has one single patient ever come off insulin. In fact, normally what happens is the dosage increases as the years go by. In 6 months, he got 11 patients off insulin. Now, how amazing is that, right? Tell me that that's not a legitimate option. Dr. Brian Lenskes, please stand up. So not only that, he decided like me, like I'm doing this, right? He does the same thing, like, I've got to tell people about this. So he put on a local meeting at his church, and we had like 200 people there. He ran it over 5 weeks, and people kept pitching up every day, and guys were coming to us and saying, like, I've lost all of these. They started doing it like immediately from the first week that he started talking about it. And this created our local San Diego kind of chapter. But I got nothing to do with it. It's all him and a couple of other people. Rachel's actually here. She's another part of it. But he's doing something positive for the community, and we kind of want to try and let that be the model, and other people can go home and start doing that in their own communities in the different cities. We want this to be in every single city if we can eventually. But on top of that, the Monday morning that he got back from the conference, he called this friend of his, who's now a great friend of ours. This guy was struggling with morbid obesity, and he worked at the church that Brian works at, and Brian called him on the Monday morning after the event and said, dude, we got to talk. And he decided, after listening to Brian, that this is something that he's tried everything. And Brian told him that he needed to get a starting weight before he decided he's going to do it, but okay, you need to weigh yourself. But there's no scales that could actually take it. And he ended up going to a warehouse and asking them if they could weigh him on the pallet scale. It was 465 pounds. And there was a lot of snickering and stuff going on down the corridors and stuff because, I mean, this is like kind of not normal. And I even said to him, you need to go back there one day. And he actually told me yesterday that he really, like a couple of days ago, he actually went back and said, hey, remember that guy that came to get married, that came to get weight on that scale? She couldn't believe it. He's lost 130 pounds, and his journey's just started, and I don't know if he's here. Chuck, stand up. So if you go to any of the breakout talks in the other breakout rooms, Chuck is kind of handling all the AV requirements and the sound and all of that stuff in all of those different rooms. Take it, if you get to bump into him, have a chat to him. It's the most incredible story. And I did an interview with him that is actually on YouTube as well. And one of the things that really affected me the most, I can't even think of the right word, that had the biggest impact on me was when he was telling me how cool it was to be able to go and walk around the supermarket and buy his own food. That he can get in behind a truck now. That he gave his truck to his daughter. And he said he told her that it was because a nice big F-150 truck and he wanted it to be safe. But he said the real reason was that I couldn't even get in behind the steering wheel anymore. And he can go in people's cars now because he can get the seatbelt on. All these kinds of things that we don't even think about. That just being able to walk to the bathroom without feeling like you're going to collapse. And things that we take for granted, that his life has changed so profoundly that it makes everything we're doing here worthwhile. Okay, so I've got a few minutes left, right? The last thing that I want to talk about right now is this. I don't know how many of you have seen the blog post that I put out there about the standard of care. But what happened was that when I was talking to Gary Taubes about coming back to be a speaker at this event, just after last year's event, he suggested to me that what about having a session where we get feedback from the clinicians and that are actually trying to use this in their practice so that we can hear about their successes and their challenges and that kind of thing. And I mean, it's kind of the theme of his next book, so it's good research for him. But at the same time, I thought it was going to be a really nice idea about a different session, just not another speech, right? And I called him about 6 weeks ago and said to him, okay, so now it's on the schedule. What's this thing going to look like? And he said, well, I don't really know, but why don't we get Adele Adele Height to come and moderate this thing? I've been chatting with her a little bit about it, and maybe, maybe she'll be happy to do it. So I wrote to her and I said, Gary's thrown you under the bus. What do you think? What do you think about this? And she sent me this 3-4 page Word document with like her brain dump. And it was like, Adele, we don't want to change. This is like a feedback session. We're not trying to change the world here. But the more I thought about it, that if you sign up with us and follow us on Twitter, you actually get back a message that says, welcome to our quest to change the world. And I thought about it and said, well, okay, I've got to live up to this, right? And she started off her document by describing what a standard of care is, because that's the biggest challenge here, is doctors, even if they think it might be a good idea, they're afraid to do something because there's no accepted or acknowledged standard of care that will hold up in court, or that will, that they can adhere to. And the legal definition of a standard of care is that it's not a document, it's not a set of clinical guidelines, or it's not everything that they learned at college. It's about what a community of doctors in a particular environment with the same or similar training, what they actually do. It's a consensus. And it's nothing concrete. And we were actually talking at the back of the room now. And so the more we talked about it, the more it made me realize is that all the pieces that are required to eventually get the standard of care in place, we kind of have those building blocks in this organization, and we didn't do it on purpose. It's just kind of worked out that way. And I thought about it and thought, well, why don't we do this? So suddenly it's moved from a feedback session about a few clinicians' experiences to an initiative to try and actually launch something that will get a professional community in place, a community of professionals, clinicians, health providers that are trying to do this. It'll give them, we're going to provide training for them, we're going to provide a format for them to have discussions, talk about cases, and create and develop that community that is required to finally have an acceptable and acknowledged standard of care in place. And so part of that is we're going to develop a set of clinical guidelines, and that is not the standard of care. But what it is guidelines that will be there for clinicians. That's a starting point. And then they'll try stuff, and they'll come into the forum and say, hey, I tried this on my patient and it didn't work. And then others will respond and say, I also tried this, but I tried something else and that worked. And that's how this community is going to evolve. And that's how, in time, the standard of care will evolve. And the more that evolves, the more other doctors are going to feel comfortable and confident to be able to come in here, learn, get trained. We're going to have a badge up there that's going to tell them that if they've gone through the training and everything, that they are certified, that they at least have been exposed to all of this, this information. And yes, at the end of the day, we'll get a community together. So let me ask you quickly, how many healthcare practitioners, doctors, or nurses, RDs, not dietitians, nurses, naturopaths, how many of those in the room? Hands up. Holy moly. Okay. So, and quickly then, what about dietitians and nutritionists, health coaches, keto coaches, all those kinds of people? How many of those kinds of people are here? All right. So we've got 2 communities already that we're going to provide professional environments for those different groups of people to join. Where's Jane? So Jane's all the way here from South Africa, representing the Noakes Foundation, and they have a spin-off. They have a spin-off called the Nutrition Network that specifically provides training for doctors in this environment. And so we're joining forces with them. They're going to be providing the training, and the whole thing is all coming together. And I'm unbelievably excited about what's going to come out of tomorrow. So what I'm asking you to do, though, is if you're these clinicians and that, if you have not entered all your information into our database of doctors or dietitians. There's two different groups. If you go under providers, there's one for health professionals and there's one for dietitians. And you're able to put all your contact information in there, and people are able to search via zip codes and find you. And that's another part of developing this community is access. And then there's another piece. If you look under science, we've already entered, I don't know, it's like 130 papers now, references. Most of them, we have the full text. And if we're not able to find the full text, then at least a reference to the abstract. So we've got all the science. We're building a community of professionals. We're going to certify them when we've got training. We're going to provide an environment for them to actually collaborate and discuss things. We're developing the guidelines, and we've got from Tim Noakes to Gary Fetke in Australia to Steve Finney, I think we've got like 18 people now already that are forming our board of advisors to advise on the clinical guidelines. And at the end of the day, we're going to have this whole thing that will allow us to generate over time a standard of care. And then I think my work here will be done.